My name is Natalie Gray. I run the Eventprofs London meetup, and the talk of my talk this evening is I want my event to be more diverse. But how? So a bit about me. I'm the head of business development for VoxGig. We are a tech startup building a new platform for people working in events, organisers, sponsors and speakers. We also curate great content for people working in events, newsletters, podcasts, and also we organise our own meetups and conference. I'm also an advocate for the Tech Talent Charter, which is a UK-based organisation that's driving diversity within the tech sector. I also curate content for our Eventprofs weekly newsletters, and also very recently we've just launched an Eventprofs podcast where we talk to inspiring people working in events about their careers and what inspires them in events. So my sort of journey as a podcast host has just started. So that's another sort of exciting thing I'm involved in. And as I mentioned, we are organising a conference in April next year, on April the 3rd, in Dublin called Eventprofs Connect. So if you go to eventprofsconnect.com, you can find out about our conference that's coming up. If you want to follow me, I'm at NatJGray on Twitter, and I'm also on LinkedIn. I regularly post sort of ideas and thoughts around tech events and events in general, and also sort of diversity and inclusion, which is something I'm really passionate about. I also go to lots of events. I think events are an amazing way of meeting new people, being inspired, learning. I always want to sort of learn to do better. I go to lots and lots of sort of tech diversity events. As you can see, just there's a few things here that I've been to this year. I also go to diversity and inclusion events and just sort of general sort of tech events. This, for example, was a really awesome conference I went to earlier in the year, which was the React.js Girls Conference, where all the speakers on stage were female. And it was just a really awesome, fun, inspiring event. If anyone's interested, there's a great event running next week, which is a Mortimer Spinks and Computer Weekly event around diversity and inclusion. They'll also be announcing the most inspiring woman in IT. That'll be announced at the event as well. So definitely one to go along to if you can make it. So I'm also, as well as my sort of day job, I'm a busy mum of 2 children. I have Gil and Annie. I'm also a very busy dog owner, so that keeps me pretty busy. So I work from home. Our team are fully remote working, so it allows us to have a much better sort of work-life balance. I can stay connected with my team and collaborate with clients and the community through lots of sort of technology tools like Slack and Hangouts and things. But I'm a real advocate for making sure that, particularly if you have caring responsibilities, or anybody really that wants to sort of maintain sort of great mental health and well-being, is to always sort of see what ways you can work to make sure that you have a good flexible way of working with home and life. So that's a little insight into me at home. So I just wondered, who here works in events? Just a show of hands, sort of, and who actually works in tech events particularly? Okay, so when I go through some of the slides, I might sort of explain a few things that perhaps are very kind of terms that are used heavily in tech events that you may not have come across, so I'll just make sure I explain those to you as we go through. So I just want to sort of talk a bit about the sort of tech industry. This is really from my experience. I've worked in tech events for about 20 years, so I've kind of seen things change quite a lot over, particularly in recent years. So I just kind of wanted to sort of set the scene on my experiences in the sort of tech events industry, mainly in the UK. So in the recent past, tech events often had male speakers, usually sort of white, middle-aged, kind of middle class, university educated men on stage. There was a term often used in tech events of these kind of rock stars in events, so people that had really kind of got to the very top in the industry. They'd come along to an event to give a talk, and all the developers would crowd around them and want to ask questions. They wanted to stay in the sort of 5-star hotels and were really treated like some kind of demigods in technology. And obviously they'd worked hard to get there, but it was a very kind of male environment that they would be working in. They'd go out all night drinking. I've known of sort of speakers to stand up on stage with a beer in hand. I've actually had to go around to hotels before and knock on the door of particular speakers to get them out of bed to actually then go on stage. And so the whole kind of atmosphere is very male, macho environment, which I suppose if you're a guy, that's fine, but it's kind of it doesn't feel very inclusive for the wider kind of society or community. And beer and pizza definitely was or I guess in lots of events is still very much kind of the food and drink of choice, which again, absolutely fine. Obviously anybody can, if they want to, can eat pizza, drink beer, but it kind of is a bit of a closed sort of boys club, and that's kind of been my experience of lots and lots of events in the recent years in the software industry. And then in terms of actual events, this, quite shockingly, is how many events would look in terms of all men on a panel, all white men line up on a conference. That was actually very recently, could have been the norm, and kind of the argument would be, well, we just found like the best people giving the talk, so it wasn't our fault that they just all happened to be white men. It kind of all came to a bit of a head with the CES conference, which is the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas in 2018, and they had 6 keynote speakers, and every single keynote speaker was a white guy, apart from one guy that wasn't white, but it was all men. And they got an absolute backlash on social media. It was a PR disaster. It was the worst thing they could have done, and it just kind of came to a head that this is absolutely crazy and ridiculous and isn't indicative of wider society. And they quickly scrabbled around and got a few of the women promoted as sort of panel leaders, but it was too late and the damage had been done. So this was kind of a bit of a turning point in the events industry, and people started to think, hang on, this isn't right, and we need to start thinking about doing things better. So then, I think in the last maybe 2 or 3 years, there's been a real drive for more equality in tech and certainly in the events industry in general. Me Too, I think, has had a big effect on this. It's really sort of raised the profile of rights of women and sort of minority groups, the LGBT community, sort of anybody who wants to have a voice. And I think the Me Too campaign has been great to help sort of bring that to a fore. There's now some amazing initiatives, and you might have your others. I just wanted to highlight a couple. This lady here, Dr. Jess Wade, is amazing. She she's a professor at Imperial College London, and she runs the STEMX initiative, and she's basically running a global initiative to get more female scientists recognised on Wikipedia. So again, an amazing initiative to drive more diversity, in the Wikipedia world and bringing STEM experts to the front. And then I did a little search recently on meetup.com, just typed in women in technology in London, and I think there was over 200 different meetup groups now meeting in London on a regular basis around women who code, and then other kind of diverse groups as well. So I think there is a lot to be excited about. There's big change happening in the industry, and an example is the Lead Developer Conference now has a really diverse lineup, and I think this is starting to become definitely the norm. So I just wanted to talk about how we actually define diversity and inclusion. And I think this quote really sums it up well from Pip Jameson, who runs an organisation called The Dots. It's an organisation and community for freelancers and creative people. And she says, diversity is better for business, it's better for creativity, it's better for innovation. If we're all the same, we're just going to come up with the same solutions. And I think that kind of, for me, sums it up in a nutshell, really. Diversity is good for society in general, and it means you have lots of different voices sharing ideas and coming up with different ideas. So it's great for innovation and definitely for business. But how are we going to get there, and how are we going to change things? So the first thing I'm going to talk about is, how do you find speakers for your event? Trying to find speakers that fit your sort of diversity requirements. So I think the first thing to think about is finding the right programme committee. So if anybody doesn't know what a programme committee is, basically when you're organising a kind of medium to largish size of event or a conference, you normally would get, rather than trying to do everything yourself, you'd basically get a group of maybe about 6 people, your colleagues, people in your network, in your community. You kind of get them together, and they can contribute ideas, and you can sort of come up and discuss who your speakers are going to be, and which ones you want to choose for your event. And obviously, if you have a diverse programme committee, then they're going to have lots of different types of people they can recommend, and therefore you're more likely to find great speakers that fit your diversity requirements. So think about your programme committee. If it's just all full of white men, then it's very likely that that's probably who you're going to be choosing as your speakers. People tend to work with people and understand people that are like them. You kind of reflect who is like you. So if you have more diversity, then you're more likely to be able to pick a really interesting and more variety of speakers. The next thing is about the call for papers process. So a call for papers is quite a well-known term in the academic conference scene. It's been picked up in tech as well. And it's simply where you, if you're interested in giving a talk at an event, you go on their website and then you fill in a form and you submit your talk idea, and then a programme committee, a group of people, will assess them all and vote on which ones they want to have in their conference programme. And some people now are saying an anonymous call for papers is the way to go to get more diversity, because you don't have that unconscious bias. You can't see the names, so you're just picking them based on merit. So you can kind of see it from that perspective. Others say, well, actually, what might happen is that a bit of positive discrimination might be better. It might actually be better to know who's submitting, so you can see all the names and you can make sure you're picking out people who do fit your diversity requirements. And also the other thing is, if you've got people that are very experienced in submitting talks, these might be the people that have always given the talks, because then they're really awesome, they know how to write a great talk abstract, and again you end up with the same old people coming into your lineup. So I would say there's kind of positives and negatives of both, and it's probably best to try each different way of doing things and see what works for you and your event. And then the next thing is just ask. If you've got a network of people, just ask people for recommendations. Ask your community, who would you like to see? Ask people in your company, you might have engineers who regularly go to events, who inspires you? So just ask people, and people are always willing to share their ideas. Talk to community leaders, meet-up leaders. They're usually a wealth of knowledge about speakers. An example, I am organising a conference next year, and I spoke to somebody in my network, and she recommended a really awesome speaker who I hadn't actually come across, and turns out to be amazing. And we've now got that speaker coming to give a great talk at our event. So I wouldn't have known about this person had I not have asked. So don't be afraid to ask. Just people are always willing to share with events. And then the next thing that I think is really, really important is actually going out to events yourself and find new talent. I go to as many events as I can. It's a great way, obviously, of making new contacts, but also seeing speakers live on stage. There's nothing like that personal interaction. You see somebody great on stage, then you maybe go up and have a chat with them straight after, exchange contacts. And it's a really great way of being able to then sort of have that personal relationship with them, rather than just kind of cold emailing them, can you speak at my event? So I would definitely recommend actually going to as many events as possible and seeing how people speak live. Giving a YouTube, seeing them on YouTube is quite different to actually seeing them in a live situation. So go to as many events as you can, and I'm sure you'll find lots of different types of speakers, and you can then sort of pick and choose which events you go to that you think would be able to fit your diversity requirements. I also think it's important to sort of set a target or have some KPIs about what you want your diversity kind of makeup to look like. You basically might want 50-50 male-female, you might have requirements in terms of sort of different ethnic groups that you want represented. So if everybody has it written down and it's always at the front of their mind when they're looking to have speakers, then that's a really great way of keeping everybody on track and making sure that you've always got your diversity target in mind when you're planning your event. I actually know of a particular conference organiser who only announces speakers when he has got his diversity kind of balance always right. So if he's finding that he's got more male speakers, for example, and there's not enough females confirmed yet, then he'll actually hold back announcing any more men to make sure that the balance is always right, because his kind of diversity wish is bigger than selling the tickets, which is quite a weird way of looking at it, but it's amazing that there are people out there that are so passionate about diversity and inclusion in their events that they're willing to do that. Another way of finding more speakers is to, if you've got people who aren't perhaps as confident or as experienced as speaking on stage, then maybe you could get them to initially speak on a panel discussion. It's a lot less scary being in a panel of speakers rather than having to stand up on your own. So that's a really nice kind of gentle way of getting them up on stage into your event without having to do a 20-minute, half an hour presentation all on their own. Or you could maybe look at saying to them, well, why don't you find somebody you could give a talk together? Lots of people give talks as a pair, talking about a particular project they've been involved in, for example. So as long as they work out who's going to speak when, then speaking with that person on stage with you is a lot less scary, and should encourage more people to apply to speak at your event. The next thing that's really important is to have a code of conduct and ideally a diversity and inclusion policy published on your event website. A lot of speakers these days will refuse to give a talk at your event if you don't have a published code of conduct which says to people, these are our values, this is the behaviour that we expect, and if people don't adhere to the code of conduct, this is the action we're going to take to minimise anybody's sort of feeling uncomfortable at the event. And speakers will definitely, a lot of speakers now just will flatly refuse to speak at the event if you've not got that published on your website. And there's loads of examples. You don't have to make it up yourself. You can just use one that exists already from another event, tweak it for your own event, and maybe credit them to say, we've used that one as our sort of guide. So code of conduct's absolutely critical for speakers to come and speak at your event. So on the flip side then, that's just some sort of ideas on finding great speakers. So how do you encourage diversity with your attendees? So the first thing is basically kind of probably fairly obvious, but if you have diversity on stage, then the natural progression is that you're more likely to get diversity off stage. If you kind of see people that look like you, then if you kind of see the lineup, if you see somebody that kind of looks like you and you think, yeah, I could identify with that person, they really inspire me personally, then you're more likely to kind of buy a ticket. So if you get more people that are like you on stage, then it's going to be the knock-on effect off stage. So it's a kind of pretty obvious one, but just thought it was worth mentioning there. The venue is also really important to think about. So when you're booking a venue and you want your venue and your event to be really kind of inclusive and diverse, there's lots of different things. Here's just some examples. Things like wheelchair access is pretty important. I've run events in the past in a really cool kind of crypt underneath a church, and they didn't have a lift. And there was one time when somebody needed wheelchair access and they had to be carried down the stairs in their wheelchair, which I think this was quite a few years ago, but one, humiliating for them, and I'm sure it's probably illegal, and it's just a horrendous situation to put somebody in. So when you're booking venues, you need to think about what kind of access there is. Do people need somewhere to feed their children? Think about bathroom facilities. There's so many things that you can do to make your event really inclusive for the attendees. One thing I just wanted to mention was about sort of food and alcohol. Lots of people from different religions and cultural backgrounds might not necessarily want to go to some kind of alcohol-fueled party in the evening. So it's fine these days to limit the number of free drinks that people can have. It's a nice opportunity. The evening drinks is actually supposed to be a kind of a nice end to the event where you have networking and the sponsors get an opportunity to speak to the attendees. And you don't really want to. Well, it depends on what event you're organising, but I wouldn't want it to turn into some kind of mass get absolutely drunk and everybody's. It's just that, again, that's not a particularly inclusive sort of environment for a lot of people. And again, on the food side, think about different dietary requirements, kind of cultural requirements for food, and health as well. So there's lots of small things that you can do to make your event really memorable and feel a lot more inclusive. Another thing that attendees can do and they would really value, so if you want to get lots of different types of people coming to your event, then you can have a scholarship fund, which is basically allows anybody to apply to a fund where you can say, this is sort of the reason why I think I should get either, it might be a free ticket, it might be more than a free ticket, it could be also accommodation or cover some of your travel. And then the organisers can kind of work through the different applications and offer free tickets to people to drive more diversity. There's a great conference called ffconf.org, and I would definitely recommend you have a look at that if that's of interest. They have really nailed the diversity and inclusion way of working. And I think they're really inspiring, and they do an amazing job. They actually, I think their event's coming up, and I think they had about 100 applications, and they were offering free travel, a free hotel in Brighton, and also a free ticket. So they obviously will work through those applications and give them to the ones that they feel are most deserving. But it's just another great way of being able to get more people to come along that wouldn't normally have that opportunity. There's also an organisation called diversitytickets.org, where if you're organising a conference and you have diversity tickets available, you can actually advertise them on there, and then they sort of share that with their community. So another way of kind of getting the word out that there's these great events that really value diversity and inclusion in events. And I'd love to hear if you know of any other sort of initiatives like that. It would be great to hear about those. So swag's another one that's a bit of a bugbear. I found out recently that swag stands for stuff we all get, which I don't know if that's true or not, but I saw it read somewhere, so maybe it is, but I quite like that. And I think particularly for us women, whenever you go to many conferences, it's either incredibly low-cut, tight t-shirts for women, which personally I would never wear because I just hate that kind of thing, or they're absolutely massive, like XXL, and they look like a tent. So there's very few people who actually like or get away with wearing conference t-shirts. So again, to do something more inclusive, maybe ditch the t-shirts and think about something that's actually valuable to people and inclusive that everybody could use. Like you look at a mobile phone charger, for example, and I had put a tree on here because I know of an event being organised next year, and they're giving actual real live little trees away as swag. So you get a little sapling, and then you can take it home and plant it in your garden, or you can give it to a friend as a gift. And obviously it's quite eco-friendly, and it's just a really nice thing that everybody can get, and it's really inclusive. So have a think about, even the swag needs to be kind of thought through. What can you do to make your event feel really inclusive and everybody would enjoy using it? So all of that seems like a lot of work and a lot of effort. Maybe you just think, well, we're fine. We just get the same people coming along, everybody seems to have a good time. What if I do nothing? Well, you could do nothing, but I personally think that if you do nothing, then you kind of are almost falling over a cliff. And I think you probably would fall over the cliff and probably be squashed at the bottom. I think these days it would be a PR disaster. If you don't think about your diversity and what the lineup looks like, then you will most definitely get a backlash on Twitter, and people just won't want to have anything to do with that. And it's really dangerous in today's sort of world, and we're a lot more aware of the value of diversity in society in general. You need to think about that, and it really is a very risky thing to do. Even if you don't agree with it, it's a risky thing to do, I think. Sponsors as well, lots and lots of sponsors. I talk to loads of companies, big corporate companies that sponsor events, and most big corporate companies now have their own diversity and inclusion teams, heads of D&I, they have their own initiatives to drive more diversity within their own organisations, and they have objectives to meet in terms of recruitment in particular, and they will be asking, what's your diversity policy? Who are the speakers going to be? Is this an event that I want to align my company with? So, you could definitely lose sponsorship if you're not doing the things that you should be doing in terms of diversity. Speakers as well. Speakers will not want to be associated with an event that's, just feels a bit maybe out of date and old-fashioned because you haven't had any bother to think about, a more interesting, diverse lineup. So speakers are likely to not want to have anything to do with events like that going forwards. And ultimately, you'll sell less tickets. If you promote yourself as being really inclusive and you've got a lineup that's really diverse and interesting and wide ranging, then you're more likely to appeal to lots of different types of people and ultimately sell more tickets. So I think there's a lot of really excellent reasons why you should really think about this carefully before you organise your next event. So just a few initiatives that I know about. There's so much going on. It's a really exciting time, and there's absolutely loads going on in this space. There's just a few initiatives that, particularly around events, that I just wanted to share with you, and you might want to have a little look yourself. So there's Upfront. So Upfront is a great initiative run by a wonderful woman called Lauren Curry. She basically was fed up with being the lone female on stage at lots of events, so she wanted to do something about it. I think she said, you moan about something 3 times, then after that you just got to shut up and do something about it. So she did. And she now has an initiative where she gives coaching and mentoring to people that want to get into public speaking. They go to an event, so it kind of culminates with going to an event. They put this big red sofa on the stage, and then the people that are going through the Upfront programme get to sit on the sofa, so it's kind of a safe space for them, but they get the experience of sitting, being on stage in front of all these people, and a keynote speaker will come on and introduce them and introduce the idea of the Upfront initiative. And it's just kind of giving people that first experience of actually being on stage, and they go backstage and see the green room, and it's kind of demystifying public speaking and trying to get the fear and reduce fear and build confidence in public speaking. There's also the Diversity Charter, which is at diversitycharter.org, which was launched by Emily Webber, who's a well-known Agile consultant and speaker. And she, again, sort of really fed up with the lack of diversity at the time in events. And I would sign up to the charter as a signatory, and then you can use their assets on your event site. It's got loads of really useful resources about how to drive diversity in your events. So I'd really recommend looking at that. There's also Women Talk Design, which is a great initiative to give women sort of confidence building and training and mentoring around public speaking. And they've also got a big kind of database of female speakers that you can book for your own events. World Speech Day. So World Speech Day is amazing. Their hashtag is Unexpected Voices. And they're a global organisation. Every March they have a big day where people can give a talk from any background about any topic. But the idea is that giving talks can change lives. It's a really powerful form of communication. And Our company, VoxGig, is the Ireland ambassador, so we run the events in Ireland each year, and it's now running in, I think, over 200 countries or something. It's just an amazing, successful initiative all around helping people in public speaking. And then the final initiative that I just wanted to highlight is Global Diversity CFP Day. And I actually attended this in March this year. And again, it's a global initiative. Anybody who wants to get into public speaking but was too scared to before can go along. It's an all-day kind of workshop on a Saturday. They have mentoring, you watch some really amazing videos, and then you all get together and have to do a little presentation at the end. And I would really recommend anybody goes along to that if they are at all thinking of public speaking. And it's, again, just another great initiative to drive more diversity in the tech events sector. So just to quickly sort of sum up, these are some very awful statistics about the number of either women in technology or people from ethnic minorities. It's just a really sad, depressing state of affairs. But we can all do our bit to drive better diversity in the technology industry in general and in events. So I'd say really diversity and inclusion, it's good for events and for society in general. I think there is a real kind of movement now to improve things. I believe the statistic is that by 2020 there's going to be 1 million vacant jobs in tech available just in the UK. It's such a massive skills gap, and obviously there's a huge other workforce out there that could fill all those roles, but you have to attract those people, and one way of being able to attract people to get more into the technology industry is through events. So I think events is definitely kind of the sort of one of the pivotal ways of being able to find all these people. You really need to spend a lot of time on finding great speakers for events. It doesn't happen overnight. I personally have been going through this myself with my programme committee for the conference we're running next year. It does take a lot of work, but you have to give people these opportunities to speak. And people, if they're asked, they're very flattered and usually say yes. So, you've got to get out there and just ask people. And asking for help is absolutely key. I've been really overwhelmed by the amount of people in the community that's been willing to share their recommendations and help. And have fun making a positive contribution. It's great to go to events, and it's really inspiring to see, when you go to an event and on stage there's loads of different people with lots of different ideas, they're from different backgrounds, and it makes for more interesting content and discussion.